Deeper into the I Am. This video features quotes from Neville Goddard and is built upon the video that I did just about a couple weeks ago on the concept of I Am as referred to by Neville. And I want to share my perspectives on deeper realizations on the concept. Last video I did a discussion on Rollo May's book, Man's Search for Himself. And I want to build it upon that discussion in this quote from his book. Consciousness of self gives us the power to stand outside the rigid chain of stimulus and response, to pause, and this pause to throw some weight on the other side, to cast some decision about what the response will be. We have the ability to step away psychologically from the experience, the engagement with reality, and observe from a higher perspective. The perspective is called I Am. This perspective identifies itself, a lot of times subconsciously, but now we have the ability to consciously identify this perspective of I Am to perspectives that relate to reality. For example, if you say, I am Joseph, then by Joseph I am resembling certain characteristics of who I believe myself to be, in which I create reality from the perspective of Joseph. When you say, I am wealthy, you place yourself in the category of what you would consider wealth, be it financial wealth, wealth in spirituality, whatever perspective that you see the subject of wealth from, you identify with. When you say, I am this or I am that, it's important to remember that what you're really doing is you are identifying with something. One of the things that I realized on this journey is that most of what we identify with is what we respond to or what we react to, the outer world experiences, the five sensory data, and the meaning behind the five sensory data. What we want to do is understand that we are choosing these perspectives most of the time subconsciously, and we can develop the ability to choose consciously the reaction that we have to the different experiences. For example, say what you're doing is you decide that you're going to partake in a fitness program. And one of the identities or the I ams that you say or the perspectives that you take upon fitness is that it involves hard work. Now, if you talk to many individuals, you'll find that there are many different perspectives on the concept of fitness. Five sensory data being the word fitness and what is related to fitness. And the meaning is really assigned by each individual. Some actually experience flow and joy and happiness when it comes to fitness. But perhaps what you are identifying with is the perspective of force or frustration. When you realize that you can change your perspective about what you're identifying with, and you realize that you are not the perspective, but you are the I am prior to the perspective, you move into a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of ability to evolve your perspectives of what you identify with subconsciously and create reality or share the experience or experience the concept of fitness from the perspective that you have identified with. This ability to stand outside of ourselves and observe the meaning through reactivity gives us an enormous amount of power. We then have a greater degree of understanding of the I am perspective. Now, since most of what we identify with is subconscious, this also gives us a deeper level of the subconscious work we can do on ourselves. And no matter what it is that we identify with as far as perspectives go, we have the ability to change the identification subconsciously. This is called evolving the self-image, or being, or in other words, Neville puts it, feeling of the wish fulfilled, evolving the being within. When you realize that reality is expressing and is being experienced from your own form of expression within, in other words, it's more of a reflection, then you have the ability to change reality and your interpretation of reality from the cause within. As he also puts, no one to change but self. Let's go deeper into these I am perspectives. He says, I am is a feeling of permanent awareness. So again, using the example, permanent awareness regarding fitness is the I am prior to the perspectives that you assigned via the conscious or subconscious choice of assigning the meaning towards fitness. Same thing in regards to money, same thing in regards to relationships, same things in regard to entrepreneurship, and just about any outer world experience. He says, the very center of consciousness is the feeling of I am. I may forget who I am, where I am, what I am, but I cannot forget that I am. Okay, very important. You can forget who you are, which is a construct called self-image, where you are, which is your orientation with environment, what you are as far as title, entrepreneur, lawyer, doctor, but you cannot forget that you are the I am. That is prior to that. The awareness of being remains, regardless of the degree of forgetfulness of who, where, and what I am. He says, this is why you are told, let the weak man say, I am strong, for by his assumption, the cause substance I am is rearranged and must therefore manifest that which its a rearrangement affirms. This principle governs every aspect of your life, be it social, financial, intellectual, or spiritual. So if you identify and say, I am the weak man, you can change the concept of yourself by identifying with I am the strong man, even if you interpret five sensory data to deny this. Through the affirmation of this being, the assumption, which is the cause substance, rearranges reality and must therefore manifest rearrangement affirms, which is a reflection of the being. So again, no one to change but self. It is I am's concept of itself that determines the form and scenery of its existence. Everything depends upon its attitude towards itself. That which it will not affirm as true of itself cannot awaken in its world. So again, everything depends upon its attitude towards itself, and itself, orientation, cross-reference, relationship to outer world, people, environment, circumstance, and information reveals what we are saying I am to, the perspectives. Now the truth is, there are infinite perspectives, infinite ways of looking at whatever experiences that we have. Fundamentally, we could look at things from an empowerment standpoint, or we could look at it from a disempowering standpoint. We could look at it from a force-based standpoint, or we could look at it from a flow-based standpoint. When we change the perspectives of how we have certain experiences, or whatever shows up, we begin to experience reality from those perspectives. Many have once had a distaste or dissatisfaction to fitness and perhaps eating a certain way. But by evolving their perspectives about what they're eating and fitness, they begin to identify from a place of harmony, as in they choose to eat a certain way and they choose to be involved with a fitness program. And they find a lot of joy, bliss, and ease. I know, I am one of them. The same is to be said about, let's say, entrepreneurship or career choices or relationship choices. It is not to say that we have to force ourselves to see it from a perspective that is not in alignment with who we are, truly, which I call the higher self, but rather that we can change the perspectives to align with our true self or our higher self, because we're all individuals and we are all together one mind. And we have individual perspectives of being that we can discover about ourselves, otherwise known as our true self, through the journey of cause and effect reflection and seeing what is it that we are experiencing in this outer world? What are the perspectives we're taking on the experience? And what perspectives can we choose, either inspired by others or find within, that resonate with who we really are, so we can experience and choose the ideal scenarios and experiences, outer world circumstances, to reflect our unique perspectives that we consciously choose. The more we operate from this perspective, the more it is said that we live doing what we really love to do, being who we really love to be, doing what we love, living the way we love. It is I am's concept of itself that determines the form and scenery of its existence. So I am, you are prior to the perspectives. Concept of self, the perspectives reveal the self-image, as in your beliefs reveal what is within your self-image. And your ability to evolve your perspectives affirm a certain level of being. And that level of being, when affirmed, the self-image change, and a good video to watch is the discussion I did on psychocybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. As you change this self-image, reality begins to reflect the changes of the self-image. Your thoughts align with the self-image. Your emotional responses and reactions to outer world circumstance aligns with the self-image. Your behaviors. By the way, all of this is autotelic. Autotelic. There's a concept called autotelic that I learned from the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he says that in flow, it's essentially moving towards a destination from a place of joy and bliss and experiencing challenging situations or circumstances, but being able to rise up to the challenges and acquire new skill. When a person stays on this path, they experience actions and awareness being one, autotelic. It is then said that the person is in alignment with their being. From this, what we're discussing right here, Neville's perspective and alignment with what was discussed in the book Flow, we can say that what we're really looking for is to be autotelic. And we know when we are being autotelic, when we're not thinking about what perspectives to choose, although in the earlier stages, the cause and effect reflection allows us to evaluate what perspectives we have identified with and subconsciously chosen to evolve past and then choose automatically from an autotelic perspective the real perspectives that are in alignment with our higher self to create reality accordingly, thus experiencing more flow and more autotelic in the experience. In other words, you're not thinking about what to do, you are, and then it externalizes. What externalizes? The thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors, the actions, and the outer world experiences, and your relationship with it. So no one to change but self. All of this happens within. And the outer world relationships change. How you experience individuals will change based on how you believe yourself to be interacting with individuals based on your perspective. So thus, what shows up in the outer world, as we call this reflections, is very important to identify what we are saying I am to. What are the perspectives? And remember, you have a choice. If we find ourselves being extremely reactive, it may appear that we don't have a choice. But once we realize that we do have a choice, what we'll find is, going back to the earlier part of the quote here from Rollo, consciousness of self gives us the power to stand outside the rigid chain of stimulus and response, to pause. So what you'll find as you realize that you are not the perspectives, but you are the I am prior to the perspectives, that which you say I am to, and you affirm this, and you continue to affirm this, is that you'll actually notice a lot of times, real time, when you're experiencing something in reality, Neville calls this being reactive to the world of Caesar, you're able to pause for a moment, step outside of it, and observe the perspective you are taking on the circumstance and change your perspective so you feel differently. You experience reality and you actually move down a different thread, creating what you desire from that perspective. He says, whenever you completely become absorbed in an emotional state, you are at that moment assuming the feeling of that state fulfilled. If persisted in, whatever you are intensely emotional about, you will experience in your world. So whatever you are completely absorbed in, whenever you are completely absorbed in an emotional state, so when you are able to catch the reactivity and release from the reactivity, you are not being absorbed in the emotional state. You're more mindful. You're able to step away from it and choose another perspective. However, if you dwell upon that emotional state, then you are assuming that feeling of the state fulfilled. If persisted in, as he says, whatsoever you are intensely emotional about, you will experience in your world. So what is this emotional reactions? Really what these are reactivity from the past. If we say undesirable emotional reactions, it's more accurately put, not the desire, but how the desire is being expressed. The desire is pure. The expression of the desire is our interpretation or our perspectives, most of it subconscious, and allowing our desire to express through those perspectives, which creates what we call the world of Caesar, which are experiences or perspectives externalized as experience, called world of Caesar, reactivity or denial. So if we look at the outer world and we experience the world of Caesar, then it probably falls in some of these categories here. Is the person, information, or circumstance appearing to deny you? Is the person, information, or circumstance appearing to control you? Is the person, information, or circumstance appearing to disempower you? Is the person, information, or circumstance appearing to create resistance? The key word is appearing, and the appearing are the perspectives. And when you realize, again, you are the I am prior to the perspectives, then when you change the perspectives, what appears can be the opposite of these things. It's the same five sensory data. However, when the difference or the polar opposite or a varying spectrum on the scale of polarity is observed through perspective, we begin to further create reality from those perspectives. So then we want to say, how do we generate these perspectives? Well, from my experience, I found two ways. Number one is the deeper we affirm the being of self-love, self-acceptance, and the outer world being a reflection of the inner world, and I accept myself. And the more you affirm the ideal of what you desire to create, your vision, the more automatic you will find yourself, autotelic, choosing the perspectives. You don't even have to really think about it. What this is designed to do is help us in case we experience what he calls world of Caesar, which then is beneficial for us to cause and effect reflect. And by asking these questions about whatever it is we're experiencing, is it denying you or appearing to deny you? Is it controlling you, or more accurately put, appearing to control you, appearing to disempower you, appearing to create resistance? Then you can perhaps use some of these, what I call identity catalysts, discovering perspectives through either inner voice conversations, or you'll find having a conversation with somebody else, or just reflection. Looking at whatever that shows up from these perspectives can help. Appreciative, humility, innovative, optimistic, patient, and trusting. Let's look at an example. Say you want to create success, and part of it involves communicating with others to create deals and move forward in a spirit of harmony. When you start to interact with others, you start to notice that you are identifying with perspectives that externalize as what you would appear to call denied. In other words, others are denying you, or they're controlling you, or they're disempowering you, or they're creating resistance. You then pause for a moment, or you can do this at the end of the day through revision, and ask yourself, how can I be appreciative? How can I practice humility? How can I be innovative based on those experiences? How can I identify from optimistic perspectives? How can I realize that this is part of the journey or the bridge of incidents, and I can be more patient? And how can I trust the power of my imagination more so? The moment you start to reflect on these important catalysts, you release yourself from the reactivity of these assumptions, the denying, the control, the disempower, the resistance. And you begin to find new perspectives. You may say, you know what, I really appreciate that I had this experience that revealed this disempowering program within myself. I realize that I'm on the journey, so I'm glad that I had this experience because it is sharing with me. I am creating it so I can know more about myself. Now, this brings you into a degree of humility. Like if you have a conflict with someone and you don't assume the humility, then you might blame them or shame them rather than looking and seeing where you have contributed in the theater of the experience. So you can ask yourself, how can I look at this from a more accurate standpoint from humility to allow me to reflect upon it and understand myself? Innovative is very interesting because what you're really looking for is, what are the innovative ways of thinking that I can have about this? And it may not be what others have as far as perspectives. In other words, you can create your own perspectives that are empowering. Optimistic. Do I see this as holding me back, or is this something that is actually contributing, and how so? How can I create a higher degree of patience regarding this? So again, if you are doing business deals and you experience rejection and things are not moving through, appreciate you're having these experiences so you can have the cause and effect reflection. Come up with innovative perspectives so you can look at whatever you're experiencing to release from the reactivity of the world of Caesar. And then say, this is part of the process. I understand this is part of the journey, so I can be more patient because I am growing. And what I'm doing is I'm evolving within. No one to change but self. Through this entire journey, I am evolving within, and tomorrow is a new day, and let me observe how reality looks different. That's how I know that I'm practicing this power. And what you'll notice is that reality changes. The way you interact with others change. The way you interact with yourself changes. Your ability to respond rather than react changes, and your ability to automatically choose the perspective that is in alignment also changes because the being is evolved within. So let's now look at this other perspective, which is opportunities behind obstacles. So one of my favorite books is Acres of Diamonds by Russell Conwell. And he talks about how we are all standing on our own acres of diamonds. And everything that we have within our awareness is actually contributing to what we desire to create. The question is, do we see how so? Now, the same is to be said of perspectives in which we identify with five sensory data and we call it obstacles. If we realize that that's a perspective on whatever it is we're looking at, then we can say, what can we do as far as our identification? What kind of perspective can we have that will see whatever it is that shows up as more as an opportunity? For example, because I have a lot of experience in the entrepreneurial space, what I found is that there have been many so-called obstacles that have shown up on the journey. The deal didn't go through. The idea that I created didn't resonate with the market. All of these, when I realized this idea of acres of diamonds, I shift my perspective around and I said, either it's contributing towards optimization data for cause and effect reflection so I can evolve my perspectives and move forward with what shows up. In other words, I can turn an obstacle into an opportunity. Or it's actually nudging me in a direction that is actually more in alignment with what I want to create. In other words, either I'm going to have this or I'm going to have something that is even more in alignment. I would say better, something that is going to be more accurate to what I desire to create. And I may assume that by seeing it from the perspective of obstacle, that it's holding me back. But in reality, what it's doing is it's guiding me in a different direction. I'm navigating this reality. This is part of the bridge of incidence. Neville says, the man who at will can assume whatever state he pleases has found the keys to the kingdom of heaven. The keys are desire, imagination, and a steady, focused attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, what I found in this journey is this steady, focused attention is developed by evolving past the reactivity. It's far easier for me to now maintain this steady focus on the feeling of the wish fulfilled because I'm not looking at the world of Caesar as denying or controlling or disempowering or creating resistance. I see it more from the perspectives of appreciative, humility, innovative, optimistic, patient, and trusting. And these are some catalysts that I came up with, but you can create your own catalysts. Now, as a result, it's easier for me to maintain my flow. So there's the desire, which is pure, and the expression of my desire in my imagination. In other words, what I desire to create is impressed on my subconscious mind via the imagination. And I know that it will express. I let go. But the let go is subconscious. It is a result of releasing certain disempowering programming on the journey to allow me to maintain the steady focus. This is also known as divine will. Rather than using force, I'm allowing divine will to express and create reality, the subconscious mind to create reality. So here are some catalysts to help us look beyond obstacles and see them as opportunities. I find joy in the puzzle of this circumstance. So in other words, opportunity is revealed when you look at the circumstance that appears as an obstacle as more of a puzzle, And the puzzle is identifying the perspective within, inner voice conversation, and choosing the one that is in alignment. Again, you can use the catalyst. In the past, I have overcame similar obstacles. When you realize that you have overcome many obstacles in your life, by reflecting on your past, you release from the reactivity and you begin to move forward. This allows me to develop my inner voice conversation and intuition. This is one of my favorite because all of this is a conversation that you and I are having right now. But actually what I am is an externalization of your consciousness. And if you can have this conversation with me via this video, then you can have this conversation with yourself in your own imagination via your inner voice. These are perspectives that I received within via my inner voice. And we all are individual expressions of the same mind, so thus we all have the power to receive these perspectives. He says, the present moment is all important, for it is only in the present moment that our assumptions can be controlled. The future must become the present in your mind if you would wisely operate the law of assumption. The future becomes the present when you imagine that you already are what you will be when your assumption is fulfilled. So you imagine it and you live it. And as you live it, if it appears to five sensory data world deny your assumption, then it's because you are identifying with a perspective. The I am is identifying with a perspective, and you can change this perspective. You don't have to do it, but you can do it if you want to be less reactive on your journey. Because in my own personal experience, whenever I desired to create something and I imagined it to be possible, it was always brought forth. And then I said to myself, do I want it brought forth from a place of force? Because certainly that was the case with many things I created in the past. Or do I want to create it from a place of joy, bliss, ease, more so in flow? And then upon cause and effect reflection, I realized that in order to have more flow, because I choose flow, I would have to evolve the meaning of the different experiences that I have in the outer world, the denial, the control, the disempower, the resistance, evolve the perspectives, choose different perspectives, affirm the perspectives, evolve the being, and have the experience be one of flow towards the destination. You can either force your way to the destination, or you're going to flow your way to the destination. Either way, you're going to get there. Psychological states externalized as metaphors. Let's discuss this. All of experience in reality is both an experience and a metaphor. You'll notice that the theater plays out with people, environment, and circumstance again and again and again to reflect the programming in the subconscious mind. When the being changes, the theater changes. So thus, if you look at life and you look at any information that you read, you could see the metaphorical lesson behind it. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It is both a story and it is riddled with metaphors. These metaphors have helped me, and as a result of the assistance that I have found through metaphors, I realized that I could look at all the different experiences that I have in my life as metaphors. So Neville says, the heart is the primary organ of sense, hence the first cause of experience. When you look on the heart, you are looking at your assumptions. Assumptions determine experience. Watch your assumptions with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Assumptions have the power of objective realization. Every event in the visible world is the result of an assumption or idea in the unseen world. Therefore, we want to affirm certain metaphors. One of the metaphors that we want to affirm is that theater plays out in the outer world to reveal the programming within. This theater is a reflection of the inner world. Now, is there something concrete that actually has a projection screen and in our neurology? We won't be able to find it. However, the metaphor allows us to navigate reality. When we talk about reactivity, when we're talking about obstacle, and we say behind the obstacle is opportunity, upon perspective shift, what we're really referring to is a metaphor. The metaphor is obstacle is the way, or acres of diamonds. These metaphors, and it's important to find different metaphors in our own life, and the book Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is riddled, as mentioned, with metaphors, evolve our assumptions because our perspectives change, the being change as a result of the metaphors. That's why in spiritual texts, there's a lot of different stories. these stories are metaphorical that evolve the psychology. They create psychological change. When the psychological change has evolved the being within, reality is created from the perspective. And the perspectives can be individually inserted in there through cause and effect reflection, or you could say at a meta level, evolve through metaphor. Now, the way we do this is you say, where have I had similar experiences, and what is the metaphorical meaning behind these similar experiences? Who else has had these similar experiences? And what are the metaphorical meanings behind these similar experiences? And my favorite, we play theater to learn the spiritual lesson. So my metaphor is that we play theater in the outer world to learn a spiritual lesson. What is the spiritual lesson? The spiritual lesson is the evolution to higher levels of understanding about the I am. Now, when I look at the world as a metaphor of evolving my perspective over to higher levels of I am, I'm able to see it because it's my assumption. So what we do is we say, what assumptions do we have about reality, and what metaphors can we identify with to evolve our assumptions? Because you could do it through cause and effect reflection and affirmation. Metaphors tend to have a lot of power. For example, one of my favorite metaphors is when Neville talks about doubt. He said there was someone interested in buying a house, but they had some doubt within them. Doubt materialized into a person that went and bought the house and left him in the cold. One of my other favorite metaphors that I learned from Neville is what he had learned from his mentor, Abdullah. And Neville approached him and said, I'm not in Barbados yet. And his mentor closed the door on him, but prior to closing the door on him, and actually shut the door, physically shut the door, he said, you're already in Barbados. That's a metaphorical story, and it is an experience. When you start to see the parallels between the experience and the metaphorical story, then you'll understand what he's really meaning. He's saying, how could you affirm and be in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and say you're not in Barbados? Why would you speak those words and recreate reality from that perspective? By closing the door, what he's really doing is closing the door on this state of consciousness that Neville was identifying with, and he doesn't want to have any part with it because in his perspective, in his reality, Neville is in Barbados and he got there first class. When we start to look at reality as both experience and metaphor, we can release ourselves from the rigidity, develop a higher degree of fluidity of mind, be able to release ourselves from the perspectives that we are identifying with, saying I am to, that is creating reality. So finally, let's talk about choosing perspectives. So what we're really doing then, through this discussion and throughout all our discussions, is identifying new perspectives and choosing them, and finding the perspectives that are in alignment with who we really are. So not just taking my perspectives if they're not in alignment with you, but sifting the internet and everywhere you go, finding perspectives that are in alignment. You don't have to affirm or choose a perspective because someone said to pick their perspective. You can choose the perspective, and ideally you want to find the perspectives that are in alignment with who you really are and what you're looking to create. Because at the end of the day, there's who you are, there's where you're going, and the journey in between, or the bridge of incidents in between. And the perspectives are externalized as experiences with people, environment, circumstance, information, on the journey, bridge of incidents, and the end result. He says the principle of least action governs everything in physics, from the path of a planet to the path of a pulse of light. Least action is the minimal of energy multiplied by the minimum of time. Therefore, in moving from your present state to the desired state, you must use the minimum of energy and take the shortest possible time. Now, in the business world, we call this leverage, or being efficient. It means the same thing. Your journey from one state of consciousness to another is a psychological one. So to make the journey, you must employ the psychological equivalent of least action, and the psychological equivalent is mere assumption. So then, what we want to integrate into our being is some key catalysts about reality in itself. Because when we evolve our perspectives about reality and ourselves to a higher degree, then we automatically choose the perspective. We don't have to sit there and say, what perspective do we choose? We can do that. And I believe that it's important to do that so that we can understand what we're creating and then evolve our perspectives. But however, if we integrate some deep level perspective about who we are, our journey, and reality, then we're creating from the perspective of what he calls least action. Let's use the catalyst here. Appreciative, humility, innovative, optimistic, patient, and trusting. Now, all of these are facilitators of least action. If you're appreciative, then you're not going to create unnecessary convolution on your journey. If you have a high degree of humility, then you're not going to end up in a lot of arguments to try to prove the other person wrong and make yourself seem right when you realize that everyone is you pushed out. When you're innovative, then whatever shows up, you see it as opportunity automatically. When you choose optimistic, you're able to release from the identification of the perspectives of the different experiences you're having related to the 5 sensory data automatically and see the perspective that it's in alignment and move down that thread. If you're patient, then you know that your desire is going to be brought forth and you realize that this is all part of the journey. Everything is part of the journey, and you accept, you release, you feel less stress, you're more at peace, calmness. Again, least action. And when you're trusting, you know that everything and everyone, all of reality is contributing to what you desire to create. And on the flip side, you trust that what you desire to create is in harmony and contributing to what all others desire to create in the spirit of harmony. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.